In the cold, sterile light of the starship's control room, Lena squinted at the glowing data pad, her three eyes widening in disbelief. The image on the screen, of a human male in athletic gear, revealed something she had not expected. "3 legs," she whispered, her voice tinged with awe and confusion. Lena, a young scientist from the Zanari species, stood frozen on the bridge of the Stellar Dawn, a diplomatic vessel on its way to Earth for humanity's first official contact. While preparing for the mission, she had stumbled upon restricted human anatomical data, and the shocking discovery now threatened to turn everything upside down. Captain Veros, the Zanari commander, noticed her distress and approached. "What's troubling you, Lena?" he asked, striding to her station. Lena hesitated, but eventually turned the data pad towards him. Veros's brow furrowed as he looked at the image, his facial ridges deepening in thought. "This complicates matters," he muttered. "We can't let this disrupt the mission. Keep it quiet for now." As the Stellar Dawn entered Earth's orbit, tensions below on the blue planet spiked. Russian and Chinese forces mobilized, their leaders skeptical of American promises of peace. In Washington, behind closed doors, contingency plans were constantly being updated. Meanwhile, at a remote airfield in Nevada, NASA engineer Liam Hartley double-checked the xenobiology scanners. His expertise had landed him a place on the first contact team, but nothing in his training had prepared him for the weight of this moment. Humanity's introduction to an alien species was imminent, and Liam was determined to make a good impression. The Stellar Dawn touched down with barely a whisper, its sleek, advanced design starkly contrasting with the human vehicles parked around it. As the ramp lowered, Liam stood tall, projecting confidence despite the nervous flutter in his stomach. Lena emerged first, her three eyes immediately locking onto Liam's form. Her gaze dropped quickly to his lower body, and she visibly stiffened. Liam noticed her odd reaction, but chalked it up to the awkwardness of a first encounter between species. "Welcome to Earth," Liam said, extending a hand. "I'm Liam Hartley, xenobiology specialist." Lena hesitated briefly before accepting his hand, her own trembling slightly. "Greetings, Liam Hartley. I am Lena, science officer of the Zanari delegation." Despite the formal words, her eyes flicked constantly downward, as if seeking confirmation of something unseen. Lena discreetly activated a small scanner in her palm, desperate to verify her hypothesis about human anatomy. But the device, unfamiliar with human physiology, beeped inconclusively, only adding to her confusion. The welcoming ceremony continued, a meticulously choreographed display of diplomacy. But beneath the surface, a dangerous misunderstanding was brewing. Lower-ranking human officials began to whisper as rumors spread about the Zanari's supposed misconceptions regarding human anatomy. Oblivious to the growing tension, Liam led Lena and her fellow delegates towards the science exchange area. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but pressed forward, determined to make the first hours of their interaction count. What Liam didn't know was that his own ordinary human body had become the focal point of an alien misconception, one that could either cement an alliance or spark an interstellar misunderstanding. Liam's instincts finally pushed him to speak with Dr. Evelyn Cho, a fellow xenobiologist on the team. "Evelyn," he whispered during a break in the proceedings, "I need your advice." "Lena, the Zanari scientist, she keeps staring at me like she's confused. What could be going on?" Dr. Cho raised an eyebrow thoughtfully. "It might be a cultural misunderstanding, or maybe Zanari physiology has something to do with it. We should observe her behavior more closely." Across the room, Lena was confiding in her colleague Scylla. "Scylla," she murmured excitedly, "you won't believe what I've discovered. Human males, they appear to have a third appendage." Scylla's eyes widened in surprise. "Are you certain? This could completely reshape our understanding of bipedal species." "My scans were inconclusive," Lena admitted, "but I need more data." The two Zanari began observing the human males in the room more closely, their scanners quietly gathering additional information. During a tour of the biology lab, Lena, distracted by her thoughts, accidentally bumped into Liam. Instinctively, he reached out to steady her. "Whoa, careful," he said, his hand resting lightly on her arm. Lena recoiled slightly, her eyes darting down to his lower body once more, her confusion deepening. Later that evening, protests erupted outside the facility. "Aliens, go home," a crowd chanted, holding crude signs with caricatures of extraterrestrials. Security tightened, and the Zanari visitors huddled together. "Don't worry," Liam reassured them. "You're safe here." The situation, however, took a turn when Captain Veros approached Liam, a look of concern on his face. "We need to speak with your leaders. This unrest is troubling," Veros said. Liam arranged a meeting between Captain Veros and Ambassador Sarah Mitchell, the lead diplomat for Earth's first contact team. As the meeting commenced, Liam overheard something through the door that made him freeze. "Confusion about human anatomy," Captain Veros was saying. "Specifically, the third leg." A stunned silence followed from the human side of the room before Ambassador Mitchell's voice responded, smooth as ever. "I see. Well, Captain, I can assure you human anatomy is remarkable in many ways." Later, Ambassador Mitchell pulled Liam and Dr. Cho aside. "We have an interesting situation," she said with a glint in her eye. "The Zanari seem to have a fundamental misunderstanding about human physiology. For now, we'll let them keep that misconception. It might give us a negotiating advantage." Liam felt uneasy but nodded, knowing he had to follow orders. However, that night, Lena and Sila were not content to let the matter rest. Shortly after midnight, they snuck out of their quarters, making their way toward the restricted research lab. Liam, alerted by the security feed, hurried to intercept them. "Can I help you?" he asked when he found them outside the lab. Lena and Sila froze, eyes wide with guilt. Before anyone could respond, an alarm blared through the facility, plunging them into a new crisis. A crisis that could either cement a fragile alliance or doom it before it ever began. As the piercing alarm echoed through the dimly lit corridors of the research facility, Liam's heart pounded in his chest. Lena and Sila, the Zanari scientists, stood frozen, their three eyes darting between him and the sealed door to the lab. The air felt thick with tension, and Liam knew the situation had just escalated beyond anything he could have anticipated. "Come with me," Liam urged, gesturing towards the lab's entrance. He knew that standing out in the open wouldn't help anyone, especially with the security forces surely converging on their location. Reluctantly, Lena and Sila followed him inside, the heavy door sliding shut behind them. Once inside, the lab's low hum filled the air, broken only by the flashing red emergency lights. Lena's gaze quickly swept the room, landing on the rows of human anatomical models, detailed diagrams, and a sleek medical scanner in the corner. Liam could see the same look of curiosity flicker across her face that he had witnessed earlier, but there was something else now. Urgency, even desperation. "We shouldn't be here," Liam muttered, glancing nervously toward the door. He knew security would be here any second, and the last thing he wanted was to be caught in a restricted area with two unauthorized alien scientists. "We had to know the truth," Lena said quietly, almost to herself. She stepped closer to one of the anatomical diagrams, her eyes wide with fascination. "For science, for understanding." "What truth?" Liam asked, his voice barely a whisper, though he already suspected the answer. "The third appendage," Lena replied, her tone clinical, but with a note of wonder. "Our data was unclear. Your species, we thought," she faltered, and Liam felt a strange mix of embarrassment and disbelief that this misunderstanding had spiraled so far. Before he could respond, the door behind them hissed open. Liam's stomach lurched as Dr. Evelyn Cho entered, flanked by two security officers. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes immediately locked onto the Zanari scientists. "Liam, what's going on here?" Dr. Cho's voice was calm, but the tension was palpable. We were just," Liam started, but before he could finish, Lena stepped forward. "We've made a terrible error," she said, bowing her head slightly, a sign of respect in Zanari culture. We misunderstood the nature of human anatomy. My scans earlier were inconclusive, and we sought to verify the data." Dr. Cho exchanged a glance with the security officers, and then with Liam, before stepping closer to Lena and Sila. "This is a serious breach of protocol," she said sternly. "You're in a restricted area. And worse, you've jeopardized the trust we're trying to build between our species." Lena's eyes widened, clearly not anticipating such a sharp rebuke. Scylla, however, spoke up, her voice firm. "We only sought the truth. Isn't that what your species values? Science, discovery?" Liam could sense the standoff was about to get worse. "We need to calm this down," he thought. He stepped between the two groups, raising his hands. "Look, this whole situation is based on a misunderstanding, right? They didn't mean any harm." Dr. Cho's expression softened slightly, but she crossed her arms, still wary. "That may be, but the fact remains. This kind of behavior could jeopardize everything we've worked for." Before anyone could respond, a voice crackled over Dr. Cho's comms device. It was Major Robert Hawkins, the base's chief of security. "Dr. Cho, this is Hawkins. The alarm was triggered by a breach in our outer perimeter. We got intruders approaching from the northeast. Looks like they're armed." A cold chill ran through the room. Liam's eyes darted toward the window, where he could see the dark desert landscape stretching out beyond the facility. Shadows moved in the distance. "Intruders?" Liam asked, his voice tight with concern. "From where?" "Unknown," Hawkins responded. "We're locking down the facility. Get to a secure location." Dr. Cho's face grew pale. "This can't be a coincidence," she murmured, her mind racing through the possibilities. "We're not the only ones interested in this first contact." Liam turned to Lena and Scylla. "You need to come with us. It's not safe here," he urged, his voice firm but laden with the urgency of the situation. Lena, still processing the gravity of the moment, nodded slowly. Scylla, however, appeared more focused, her sharp gaze scanning the room as though already calculating their next move. Dr. Cho was already at the door, signaling for the security officers to follow. "We need to get to the command center," she said, her voice now brisk and authoritative. "If this is a coordinated attack, they'll be targeting critical areas." Liam, Lena, and Scylla fell in step behind her as they hurried down the dimly lit corridors, the blare of the alarm still echoing overhead. Every corner they turned brought the possibility of danger, and Liam's thoughts raced with questions. Who were the intruders? And why now, in the midst of such a delicate moment in human-Zanari relations? As they passed through a security checkpoint, Liam caught a glimpse of the perimeter monitors. The intruders had broken through the first line of defense, a small but heavily armed group moving swiftly under the cover of darkness. The camera feed flickered for a moment before the screen cut out entirely. "They're jamming our surveillance," one of the guards muttered under his breath. Liam swallowed hard. "How many of them?" "Unknown," the guard replied, his grip tightening on his rifle. "But they're moving fast." The group reached the reinforced doors of the command center, which slid open with a low hiss. Inside, the room was a flurry of controlled chaos. Major Hawkins stood at the center, barking orders to his team, while Ambassador Sarah Thompson conferred urgently with Captain Dronar, the leader of the Zanari delegation. Lena and Scylla exchanged a quick glance, and then Dronar's gaze fell upon them. His usually stoic face softened, but only slightly. "I see you two have been busy," he remarked, his tone laced with disapproval. "We encountered a misunderstanding," Lena began, but Dronar cut her off with a sharp wave of his hand. "Whatever you've done, we'll deal with it later. For now, we have a more pressing issue." He turned toward the display screen that flickered to life, revealing the perimeter of the base. "Our sensors detected the intruders just moments before they breached the outer defenses. We suspect they may be affiliated with a rogue faction, either from Earth or another power watching our interactions closely." Ambassador Thompson stepped forward, her calm facade barely masking the stress of the situation. "It's possible someone is trying to sabotage the talks, disrupt our alliance before it even forms." Liam's stomach churned at the thought. With the tension between Earth's own nations already fragile, the appearance of outside threats could unravel everything. "We need to secure the Zanari delegation," Major Hawkins said firmly. "If these intruders get to them, it could spark an interstellar incident." "No," Dronar interrupted, his voice cold and commanding. "We Zanari will fight if necessary, but we do not hide. I suggest we defend this place together. Liam looked to Dr. Cho and Ambassador Thompson, silently hoping they would agree. Though he was no soldier, the idea of standing alongside the Zanari made him feel a strange sense of unity, despite the misunderstandings that had nearly torn them apart. Agreed, Ambassador Thompson said, after a brief pause. But we need to be smart about this. We can't let this turn into an all-out battle. Not here, not now. Suddenly, the lights in the command center flickered, and the emergency backup system kicked in. A distant explosion rumbled through the base, and the control monitors displayed a new feed. One of the storage warehouses on the northeast side of the base had been destroyed. They're targeting key infrastructure, Major Hawkins growled. We need to move now. We'll form 2 teams, Dr. Cho said quickly. One will secure the command center, and the other will head to the labs. If they're after our research, that's where they'll go next. Liam instinctively stepped toward the team headed to the labs, his heart pounding, but his resolve strengthening. Lena and Sila followed closely, their usual scientific curiosity replaced by a sharp focus on the task at hand. They had come seeking answers, and now they would have to fight to protect everything they had learned. As they moved down the hallway, weapons at the ready, Liam felt a strange shift in the air between him and the Zanari. The earlier confusion about human anatomy seemed trivial now, a small misunderstanding in the face of a much larger threat. What mattered now was survival, and the fragile alliance they needed to preserve at all costs. Do you think these intruders are from Earth? Lena asked quietly as they rounded a corner, her 3 eyes scanning the shadows for any movement. I'm not sure, Liam replied, gripping the sidearm he had been issued for emergencies. But it feels like more than just a human problem. Whoever they are, they knew exactly when to strike. They approached the lab doors, where Liam swiped his access card. The room was still as they entered, the hum of equipment the only sound. Lena and Sila immediately moved toward the medical scanners, retrieving the stolen device they had pocketed earlier. Suddenly, the door behind them slammed shut, and the lights in the lab dimmed to a deep red. They've locked us in, Liam whispered, realizing the intruders were closer than they thought. Just then, a soft voice crackled over the facility's PA system, dripping with menace. You've made a grave mistake, humans and Zanari. Liam's blood ran cold as the voice continued, echoing through the lab like a whisper from the dark. You don't understand what you're up against, but soon you will. The door to the lab shook violently as something, or someone, began forcing it open. The door rattled again, harder this time, as if whatever was outside was determined to break through. Liam's heart raced. He scanned the room, his mind working overtime. We need to get out of here, he whispered to Lena and Sila. The Zanari scientists, normally composed and analytical, looked tense. Lena's 3 eyes darted between the door and the stolen human device she still clutched in her hand. Sila, her facial ridges flaring with stress, stepped forward. There's a maintenance hatch at the back of the lab, she said, her voice hushed but urgent. It's small, but it should lead us into the ventilation system. Liam nodded. Let's move. They sprinted to the back of the lab, their footsteps echoing against the cold, sterile floor. The door continued to groan under the pressure of the intruder's attack. Liam could feel his heart hammering in his chest as Sila Pride opened the maintenance hatch, revealing a narrow tunnel barely large enough for them to crawl through. You first, Liam said to Lena, who hesitated for only a moment before climbing into the tight space. Sila followed, and then Liam, glancing back at the lab door as it started to buckle under the force from outside. Just as he pulled himself into the tunnel, the door burst open with a deafening crash. A shadowed figure stepped into the room, its features obscured by the dim light and a mask covering its face. Liam held his breath as he closed the hatch behind him, sealing them in the tunnel. The space was cramped, and the walls pressed in on them as they moved forward, inch by inch. Where does this lead? Liam whispered to Sila, his voice barely audible over the distant sounds of footsteps in the lab they had just escaped. The tunnels run beneath the base, Sila replied. If we keep going, we should reach the east wing where the backup generators are. We can use the emergency escape route there. Lena crawled ahead of them, her mind racing as fast as Liam's. "Do you think they'll follow us?" she asked, her voice shaky. "They will," Liam replied grimly. "But if we can get out of the base, we might be able to reach Dr. Cho and the others. They need to know this isn't just an internal attack. It feels coordinated, like something bigger is happening." The tunnel narrowed as they continued, and Liam's shoulders scraped against the sides. After what felt like an eternity, they reached an access point. Scylla pushed up the hatch and climbed out, followed by Lena and then Liam. They emerged into a dimly lit corridor, the sounds of distant gunfire echoing through the base. "We're getting closer," Scylla said, her voice tense as she scanned the hall. "The backup generators should be down this way." As they hurried forward, Liam's mind raced with questions. Who were these intruders? They clearly weren't just some rogue human faction. There was too much precision, too much planning. Could they be another alien species? Someone opposed to humanity and the Zanari forming an alliance? They reached the generator room, its heavy metal doors slightly ajar. Liam frowned. "That's not right," he muttered. "This place should be locked down." He pushed the door open slowly, revealing the massive humming machinery of the base's backup power system. The room was dark except for the faint red glow of emergency lighting, and it was eerily quiet. "Stay alert," he whispered, motioning for Lena and Scylla to follow him inside. As they entered, Liam felt a prickling sensation on the back of his neck. Something wasn't right. The room was too still, too empty. Just as he was about to speak, a voice echoed from the shadows. "You're too late." Liam spun around, his heart lurching in his chest. From behind one of the generators stepped a figure, a man clad in black tactical gear, his face concealed by a helmet and visor. But the voice was cold, unmistakable. "Who are you?" Liam demanded, his pulse pounding in his ears. The figure stepped forward, removing the visor to reveal sharp, calculating eyes. "You won't live long enough to care." Before Liam could react, the intruder raised a small device and pressed a button. A high-pitched sound filled the air, and within seconds, the room's power systems flickered violently, the generators sparking and sputtering. Scylla gasped, her eyes widening as she realized what was happening. "They're overloading the generators," she said in horror. "They'll destroy the base." Liam's mind raced. There has to be a way to stop it. "Where's the control panel?" Scylla pointed to a small console on the far side of the room, but as Liam moved toward it, the intruder blocked his path. "You're not going anywhere," the man said coldly, stepping forward, drawing a sleek, lethal-looking weapon from his belt. Liam clenched his fists, his options dwindling. There was no time to think, only to act. Just as the intruder leveled the weapon at him, a sharp blast of light filled the room. Lena, her three eyes glowing with determination, had activated one of the human devices she had pocketed earlier. It emitted a pulse of energy that disoriented the man for just a split second, but it was enough. Liam lunged forward, knocking the weapon from the intruder's hand and sending them both crashing into the side of a generator. The man grunted in pain, but recovered quickly, swinging a vicious punch toward Liam's face. Liam dodged, barely, before retaliating with a powerful elbow to the man's stomach. As they struggled, Scylla rushed to the control panel, her fingers flying over the controls. "I can shut it down," she called, her voice frantic, "but I need more time." Liam grappled with the intruder, both of them locked in a desperate struggle. The man was strong, but Liam was fueled by adrenaline and fear. He couldn't let the base fall. He couldn't let everything they had fought for be destroyed. With a final surge of strength, Liam slammed the intruder's head against the generator, knocking him out cold. Gasping for breath, Liam turned to Scylla. "How much longer?" he asked, wiping the blood from his lip. "Almost there," Scylla replied, her hands flying across the console. Finally, with a loud click, the generators powered down, and the dangerous overload ceased. Lena exhaled in relief, collapsing against the wall. But before they could catch their breath, the PA system crackled to life again. The same voice from earlier echoed through the room. "You may have stopped this, but you haven't won. We're already inside." Liam exchanged a glance with Lena and Scylla. The battle was far from over. The overhead lights flickered back on, casting a cold, sterile glow over the room. Liam stood over the unconscious intruder, breathing heavily, his mind racing. His knuckles were bruised from the fight, and he felt the sting of fatigue creeping in, but there was no time to rest. Whoever this mysterious group was, they had already infiltrated the base. Scylla stepped away from the control panel, her face pale but determined. The generators are stable for now, but they won't stop. Whoever they are, they're already moving on to their next target. Lena, who had been examining the unconscious intruder, straightened up. "We need answers," she said, her voice firm despite the fear in her eyes. "We need to know who's behind this, and why they're attacking now." Liam nodded, glancing down at the man on the floor. "We'll take him with us? Maybe Dr. Cho can figure out who he is. But first, we need to get to the command center. Ambassador Thompson and the others need to know what's happening." Scylla pulled a set of cuffs from a utility belt and secured the intruder's hands behind his back. "Let's move quickly. If there's more of them inside the base, we're not safe here." They hurried through the dimly lit corridors of the base, the air tense with the weight of the unknown threat. Every echo, every distant sound made Liam's heart pound faster. Whoever had breached the base had done so with precision and intent. This was no ordinary attack. As they approached the command center, the tension in the air grew heavier. The doors to the control room were wide open, and the sound of frantic voices echoed from inside. Liam recognized Ambassador Thompson's voice, sharp with urgency. "They've breached the outer defenses. How did this happen?" Thompson demanded. Major Hawkins' voice cut through the chaos. "We're still trying to figure it out, but they must have had inside help. Our security systems were compromised before the attack even began." Liam, Scylla, and Lena stepped into the room, drawing the attention of the officials inside. Ambassador Thompson's eyes widened slightly as she saw the unconscious intruder slung over Liam's shoulder. "What's going on?" Thompson asked, her voice taut with concern. Liam dropped the intruder unceremoniously onto the floor. "We found him in the generator room. He was trying to overload the system and blow the base. There are more of them, and they're already inside." Thompson's expression darkened. She turned to Major Hawkins. "How many intruders are we talking about?" Hawkins shook his head grimly. "It's hard to say. We've locked down most of the critical areas, but these guys are professionals. They know the base's layout, and they've been one step ahead of us the whole time." Liam took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. Whoever they are, they're after more than just sabotage. They've coordinated this perfectly to happen during the Zanari delegation. There's no way this is a coincidence. Lena stepped forward, her voice soft but steady. "The question is, are they trying to destroy our alliance or prevent it?" The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of her question hanging heavily in the air. Scylla knelt beside the unconscious intruder, pulling out a scanner from her bag. "Let me see if I can get some information on him," she said, pressing the scanner to his wrist. "If we can find out who he is, we might get a clue as to who's behind this." As Scylla worked, Liam turned back to Ambassador Thompson. "There's something else you need to know," he said, his voice low. "This attack, it's too sophisticated for just a rogue faction. It feels like another species is involved. Maybe even one we don't know about yet." Thompson's eyes narrowed. "What makes you think that?" Liam hesitated. "The way they're moving, their tactics, it's too advanced for any human group we've encountered. And the timing, it can't just be a coincidence that they're hitting us right when we're on the verge of forming an alliance with the Zanari." Before Thompson could respond, Scylla's scanner beeped. She looked up, her face pale. "This guy, he's not human." Everyone in the room turned to look at her. "What do you mean?" Liam asked, stepping closer. Scylla held up the scanner, her voice shaking slightly. "His DNA? It's been altered. He looks human, but there are markers here that don't match anything in our genetic database. This isn't just a human who's been trained by an alien species. He is one." A murmur of shock rippled through the command center. Ambassador Thompson's face hardened. "Are you saying we have shapeshifters on the base?" Scylla shook her head. "Not exactly. This is more advanced. Whoever he is, he's been engineered to pass as human, down to the last detail. But his DNA, it's alien." Liam felt a chill run down his spine. "That means we could have more of them here, posing as humans. They could be anywhere." Thompson nodded grimly. We need to initiate a full security sweep. Anyone not verified by DNA scans is to be detained immediately. Major Hawkins snapped into action, barking orders to his team. Lock down the base. No one in or out without clearance. As the command center erupted into a flurry of activity, Liam's mind raced. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just a sabotage attempt. It was an infiltration. And whoever these shapeshifters were, they had a clear objective: destabilize humanity's alliance with the Zanari. Lena stepped closer to Liam, her voice low. This changes everything. If they're capable of infiltrating us like this, they could have already gotten close to key officials, maybe even higher up. Liam nodded. We need to find out how deep this goes. But we can't do it from inside the base. We have to take this to the Zanari leaders before it's too late. Ambassador Thompson overheard them and turned sharply. You're not going anywhere, she said. This base is on full lockdown. Liam shook his head. With all due respect, Ambassador, if we don't warn the Zanari, this alliance is as good as dead. They need to know the truth before these infiltrators get to them. Thompson's eyes flickered with uncertainty, but then she sighed. Fine, but you're not going alone. Take a security detail and keep this quiet. We can't risk a full-scale panic. Liam nodded, already feeling the weight of the responsibility pressing down on him. Time was running out, and the threat was more insidious than anyone had realized. But one thing was certain. If they didn't act quickly, humanity's first intergalactic alliance would be shattered before it even began.